Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of the Iglu podcast, or the Iglucast as we're going to call it. On today I've got Gareth Gray, Creative Director at Iglu Media, and I've got myself, Head of Marketing at Iglu Media, and our special guest today is Michael Briers, who's Associate Editor at We Got This Covered and Chief Dinosaur Supervisor at Polygonosaurus.
Thank you for having me.
Basically this episode we're going to talk about 2014 and what games we loved, what games we hated, and then we're going to try and agree on the top 3 games of the year, which won't go well at all because I think we have very different opinions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess you can go first, Gareth. What was your 5th best game of the year?
My 5th best game was PT, which is an odd choice mainly because it's a demo, but I basically chose it because I can't remember anything, whether it's a game or film or TV show, that has actually had me so terrified. And for a free demo, there was actually, I put probably about 5 or 6 hours into it, which was, in terms of value, absolutely brilliant. But I don't know, it's just, it was Hideo Kojima. I'm a massive fan of him. I'm a Metal Gear Solid fan, and it's just, there doesn't seem to be anyone like him when it comes to constructing the sort of game that doesn't just, it's not just gameplay, it's complete atmosphere, it's completely immersive. It takes you right in, and even though you were doing the same thing over and over again, just with the use of sound and little bits of detail here and there, it really helped me crap on myself, and that's a powerful thing for a game to do.
It's so much more than just a marketing trick as well, like considering it is essentially a teaser for Silent Hills.
Exactly.
The production values were absolutely off the chain.
But it worked as well as almost as a good revival for Silent Hill, because I think a lot of people had lost faith in the franchise, but off the back of that, it would make me want to check out Silent Hills.
Yeah,
I'm definitely interested now.
Well, that's the thing. I was never a Silent Hill player, but to be honest, if they were to just bring it out without PT, I would have had no interest. Now I'm actually quite interested, and I will probably get it, even though I hate scary things. But it's I don't know. It just turned my head completely, and I think it's probably the best demo I've ever played. Demos kind of lost their way a bit. I remember back in the day when I was younger, you used to get like a CD and you'd have demos, 4 or 5 on one disc, and it was a real thing. It was something you looked forward to on a monthly basis. And then with the advent of digital downloads and stuff, demos kind of went by the wayside. You didn't really get them that much. Trailers sort of took over, but I think PT sort of seen a resurgence of that, and it's shown what can be done. And that's it. It wasn't just like cutting out a bit of a game. It was literally it was a perfectly crafted little bit of gameplay that really took you in. And I can see why I got a lot of attention, and I can see a lot of people who perhaps like me weren't Silent Hill fans who've been taken in by it, and I think it works very well. But as a standalone bit of content, it was pretty powerful stuff.
It feels like they could have charged for it as well.
Absolutely.
Like it could have been a standalone game completely separate from Silent Hills, and people still would have went crazy for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, because it's been a year of games that haven't been particularly good value, and you don't get better value than a free game that gives you that much scares and that much entertainment.
Exactly.
The releases without being broken or any issues.
Yeah.
Doesn't need a 20 gigabyte patch.
Day one patch.
What would your 5th one be then, Michael?
Number 5.
If you had to give numbers to them.
If I ranked them, it would probably be Child of Light, Ubisoft's kind of avant-garde side project. There wasn't much really hype behind it because Ubisoft as a publisher is known for all its AAA franchises. You have Assassin's Creed and iterations into the Far Cry, but it was actually off the back of Far Cry 3. The creative director Patrick Plurd, it was his kind of passion project, and when he set it up, it obviously is like a love letter to JRPG, that whole genre. And when you hear of an RPG coming from a Western studio, people would not be necessarily apprehensive, but they wouldn't really have the kind of depth and story content that would be associated with games like Final Fantasy and stuff like that.
You assume Skyrim or Dragon Age basically from a Western studio.
A Western RPG is like traditionally defined by its setting, like Skyrim and the whole Elder Scrolls like series in general, whereas JRPGs are known for their lovable, eclectic characters with their crazy ass hairstyles and stuff like that. But for Child of Light, it had this like fairy tale aesthetic, and it was told in rhyme, and it was just really unique. And it proved to be so successful that they're actually talking about a sequel, and the development team were actually installed as a core team within Ubisoft themselves. So it obviously is a successful studio, and if they have the key money makers for them every year are obviously facilitating that content on the side, and if that continues, it's a great thing to balance the creativity with still providing yearly installments for the people who love Assassin's Creed and
Yeah,
things like that.
we need 1,000 more Child of Lights and a lot less Assassin's Creed
Exactly,
movies,
yeah.
I think.
So if you have that nice equilibrium there, it's perfect for a studio because they're appeasing both audiences. But Child of Light on its own was excellent. Like the gameplay, even the combat system was quite unique. And then you had the story itself of Aurora, like traveling through to try and find her mother and stuff. It was powerful stuff. It took me by surprise. So I think that's why it would be number 5, definitely.
Yeah, definitely a surprise. I think my 5th one would probably be Dark Souls 2, if I had to give them numbers. I didn't play it as much as I wanted to, but I probably sunk about 50 hours into it. I didn't actually beat it or the DLC, it's ongoing, but I really enjoyed the experience. It was like the first one, but better. And seeing the re-release coming up next year, and Bloodborne as well, which is PS4 only, sadly. But seeing them come up has just got me really excited for that kind of game again, and the genre is really experiencing a resurgence. And the first Dark Souls definitely brought that back, and the second one was just a better iteration on it. And if they give a big raft of improvements in the re-release, then it'll be an even better game, and will probably be one of my Game of the Years for 2015, if we're allowed to say re-releases. Yeah. But even the DLC that came with Dark Souls, the Crown of the Iron King, Sunken King and
Ivory
King, improved on the formula just immeasurably, and I've heard that the Ivory King one is the best example of the Dark Souls gameplay so far. So I'm excited to get back to that eventually, probably in the re-release, but I loved it. It was great.
I've heard wonderful things, but it's,
I'm sure it's very
it's
nice.
one of those games I know I can't go into Dark Souls 2. I have to play Dark Souls 1, and then
I'd be like that
that's,
myself.
Yeah.
that's double the time commitment, and it's
Yeah.
something I definitely want to do, but it's
Well,
it's on a
it's-
very long list.
In terms of like, you don't need to start at 1 to understand the story or anything.
Yeah.
So I would say you could start at 2 easy enough. Even
Yeah.
the re-release next year would be the perfect starting point to
Yeah.
get into it, because it's different worlds, and there's bare tiny story links, but it's nothing major. It's just little Easter eggs, really.
That's why I'm intrigued by Bloodborne, because we actually got a little bit of hands-on at EGX with Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Well, you have spent a little bit longer than me being the Souls fan, but
I win.
Bloodborne, it's obviously come from the same studio and stuff, but it is more dynamic. The combat, it's like way more fast-paced. You know, Dark Souls is renowned for being this, putting you into the shoes of this lumbering character, and that is what makes it so difficult and rewarding at the same time. And it obviously has found like a really hardcore fan base out of that. But I think Bloodborne is almost going to appeal to a wider fan base, like having the Victorian setting and even having like the ability to have different characters and like guns and stuff like that. It'll be interesting to see how it's received, especially being a PS4 exclusive. They could maybe have like a whole new franchise, like a side franchise,
Yeah.
as well as the Souls one. So
Hopefully that'll make them bring out an Xbox One then.
you never know.
But I doubt it. So number 4 then, moving down the list.
Yeah, I mean, my number 4 is, and it feels like such a sin to put it at number 4, but it's Monument Valley on iOS, and it's nice to see a very good premium game on iOS. It seemed like almost that was a dying art, certainly last year and the year before. It was like freemium was everything, and for me personally, I think freemium games are just they're like a completely separate bracket for something that's premium. I think Monument Valley showed, along with a couple of other games, but it showed you can still have fantastic mobile games that are worth paying, 4 or 5 quid for. Very polished games. The gameplay quite unique in a way. I mean, it was. You can tell it's built by a design studio, not a game developed, like a design studio with their own development team within it, as opposed to a game development company. And it was just beautiful. The story is simple. It's one of those stories that you probably don't really know inside out, but it was a journey in a sense, and it reminded me of Journey in a way. But it was a very polished game. The fact that we got DLC, halfway through the year, I thought was brilliant. So it was a good excuse to dip back into it. And yeah, it was one of those games that sort of reminded me about back then. We were obviously a game development studio. It opened my mind again as to the sort of games that maybe we want to look to doing, and just opened up when it comes to developing ideas for new games. It gave me a lot of food for thought in terms of the limiting factors that I had imposed on myself were sort of taken away in a sense, because it's not fast paced. It's very slow. It's very it's not even difficult in a sense. It's just something you have to work through, and you can take your time over it. And I just had that feeling that it was a beautiful thing, and it was good to spend time on it. And it's something that I'll definitely pick up and play again in the future. My girlfriend isn't much of a gamer, but that's the sort of game that sort of transcends from gamers into the mainstream, and she was able to pick it up and grasp it very easily. So things like that always get bonus points with me. So it can open up new people to what is a game. You know, people think of Candy Crush, or they think of Call of Duty, but something like Monument Valley, it's kind of, it's not a million miles from sort of swiping through beautiful photographs, but it's a little bit more interactive than that. Very well designed with the sound and the graphics, and with a nice story sort of implemented on top of it. I think it was a fantastically crafted game.
It's kind of that perfect gateway game where you would show it to someone who's maybe not necessarily a gamer and say, look at this, and you kind of could say, well, this is also like this, and sort of move them into more gamey games from Candy Crush.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just, it's perfect in that way. What would you say is your 4, if you had to?
Forgive me if I sound like a shill for Ubisoft, but I'd probably pick Valiant Hearts: The Great War. It's another example of a Ubisoft game this year coming out that isn't a blockbuster that would immediately attract a massive install base. Because traditionally speaking, when games have a war setting, it's always going to be World War II. It's much more cinematic, like combat, and it's been like well tread territory across from Call of Duty to Medal of Honor and any type of game that you can imagine. But Valiant Hearts takes it to World War One, and showcases the trials and tribulations of just the people who went through that and experienced that type of combat. It was obviously it's episodic in the sense that like you play as 4 different characters, and it's not strictly speaking linear as well. So you kind of explore both sides of the conflict. You play as like a Belgian woman and a typical like American guy called Freddy. He's like a real stereotype, like this hunking character or hulking character, but
he's the tank.
Yeah, totally. But no, I think Valiant Hearts it's a really poignant take on that subject matter, and I think the ending to it and the soundtrack is probably like it really resonated with me, and it's just like one of the experiences that you really take away. Like if you look back at the year in retrospect and think that is the game that really it was much more than some of its parts, and like the ending just wrapped it up really nicely. It wasn't going to be like a sequel or a franchise or anything like that. So, and that is almost like rare to come by these days, especially when you think of a studio like Ubisoft trying to iterate on that every year, and they're renowned for having those franchises. So I think it was just like a nice little surprise and a nice package.
You had a different opinion of Valiant Hearts, didn't you, Gareth?
Yes, I mean slightly. I mean I agree with everything Michael said. It was a very poignant story. It was very powerfully told, and the artwork and the sound in particular were fantastic. My only issue with it was, and it may have been just down to the frame of mind I was in when I played it, but you had this incredibly moving story, and at times, 5 minutes into the game I was welling up and it was pulling at the heartstrings, but then in the next instant you would be, engaged in some sort of cartoony animation, like, I don't know, like not childish as such, but like slapstick action where you're, lobbing bottles of wine at some Germans type of thing, and that sort of disconnect between the story and the gameplay kind of disappointed me in a way. I mean, I had high hopes, I'd heard good things, and I think the sad thing is the gameplay was brilliant on its own, and the story, the poignancy of it all was fantastic as well. It was just when they tried to blend them together, I think they maybe missed something, but to be fair, there was enough in it to make me know that at some point I will go back and play it again, and it's entirely possible I'll change my mind, but it just underwhelmed me a bit. There's like a ludonarrative dissonance, and it especially with something such a serious subject matter, I think it's more important that you stay on tone and you keep it a little bit more consistent through the story side and the gameplay.
Oh, I can totally see where you're coming from. There was a lot of instances in the gameplay where you were doing like trivial almost, even the way it was implemented, it was just almost not button mashing in a sense, but it was that complete disparity between gameplay and the like powerful engaging narrative, where you could see that it maybe be a core weakness. But I think I just maybe seen through that, and
yeah, that's probably it. I mean,
installed onto the list.
Yeah, I think that's it. On a different day, in a different frame of mind, I'm pretty sure I would have played it through in one go.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things that I don't think of it as a bad game. I think of it as a game that I have a particular issue with, and that issue is maybe something I'll be able to overlook. Well, I will go back and play it, that's not in doubt, so there's definitely something, I can see why it's in your top 5, and I can see why so many people rave about it.
Yeah.
It's just a personal bugbear of mine, and it's probably me just being a complete pedant.
No, totally relatable.
I haven't played it, but the dog looked really cute. So 10 out of 10.
Would recommend.
I think my 4th game would probably be Shadow of Mordor. I don't know, have either of you played it?
No, but I own
once
it.
you play.
You own it, but you haven't played it. But it's I know it started life as a Batman game, and you can really see that in the combat. The combat is basically a mix of like Batman combat and Assassin's Creed gameplay of traversal, and the whole idea of like going to towers and stuff to unlock more parts of the map. But the really neat thing about it was the nemesis system, which basically meant when you came across an orc, he'd have a certain name and personality, and he'd remember you if you fought him before, and he'd say stuff like, I've killed you once, I'll kill you again. And if you hit him in the head with an arrow, he'd have an eye patch the next time you came across him, or if you pushed him into a fire, he'd be burnt. And they all had different fears, and they were afraid of certain enemies, or they couldn't be killed by stealth, or they could be killed by an arrow. And it was just a really interesting system built on top of a game that could have been mediocre by itself. The big problem I had with it was with the ending, but up until that point I loved it, and I put 30 hours into it, and I definitely say it was a great game. It combined the best stuff with Batman and the best stuff of Assassin's Creed, and I'd recommend anyone to give it a shot.
It's good, because Lord of the Rings has had like a kind of patchy past with like licensed games. The only kind of games that have nailed it for me have been the Lego games. Like I remember playing the Lego Lord of the Rings games. I don't know, maybe it's just that kind of Lego sub-series of games. It always has like nails almost, because it has like a comedy aspect. But from what I've heard, like Middle Earth has been one of the best Lord of the Rings games to date. So it's nice to see, and this year's almost been a good good year for licensed games with the likes of South Park and Alien Isolation. But we'll get to that in a second.
Well, the Lord of the Rings game War in the North, which was a few years ago, was good as well, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. So it's good to see the license, at least some good being done with it and something unique. And it was definitely left open. There's going to be a Shadow of Mordor 2, without a doubt, especially after its success.
Yeah, I would say
whether that's a good thing or not.
It was odd, because I remember when I got the PlayStation 4 last year around release time, I was looking through basically a long list of what games are coming up in the next 12 months, what will they get. The one that didn't get much press actually was Shadow of Mordor before it came out, but it took my attention, and I don't know, I'd seen a few positive reviews, and the reason I own it is because everyone's only had good things to say about it. I haven't heard anyone criticise it. I do love Lord of the Rings. I don't expect it to be game of the year as such, but I've heard enough that'll make me want to go and play it. I will enjoy it. I like the story, I like the setting. I've actually enjoyed some of the past Lord of the Rings games, but again, it's not to the point where they're award-winning games. They're just fun. They're quite mindless. You can go around just killing things. It's not difficult. There's nothing frustrating about it. It's just enjoyable to be in that setting.
That's almost the thing, with Shadow of Mordor, is I feel like I have to defend my decision, because it doesn't seem like the kind of game you come away being like, that was my favourite game of the year.
Yeah.
Maybe that's like indicative of how the year went, but it's based off Lord of the Rings. The gameplay is took from Batman and Assassin's Creed. There's little unique about it apart from the nemesis system. Yeah. But it just was something about it. It was just pure fun. Just you could lose hours playing it, and it just felt so just fun and easy. And you always feel like, your game of the year should be something that was a bit meatier, but it was just pure fun, and that's what I was looking for, and I loved it.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with games like that. Even if you're only putting 10 hours into it, if you've enjoyed them and it feels pretty polished, and if the end you feel that you can come away with it, and you're not, you might not want to go back to it ever, but that's not the point. If you can get 10 good hours into it, enjoy it, it's fun, it's pretty mindless, it doesn't require too much of a time commitment like games like Destiny or whatever, then I think that's perfectly fine. And it might not win Game of the Year, but maybe there's a bit of snobbery in that when it comes to games based around films. Like, it feels like because it's not its own standalone IP, but I don't know. It's good to see the positive reviews around that, because I think Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth is a fantastic setting for games, and the idea that somebody's maybe doing something very good in that area and there's something to build on in the future, it's actually quite exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Are we on to 3 now? I think we are. What would your third game be, if you could?
My third game would be the notorious time sink that is Destiny. And it's I'm still largely addicted to it. The reason I haven't touched Shadow of Mordor is because I bought it, but I'm still playing Destiny, and I can't stop playing Destiny. I am completely on the treadmill. I can't get off, and I genuinely love it. Now, it did get. I probably put about 100 hours into it since it came out, I'm enjoying it. I've had friends who started with me and maybe disappeared, and then I've found like my own sort of raiding group, which is, it sounds so sad, but it's actually fantastic to get involved in. There did come a time, the day before the DLC came out, I kind of threw the head up with it and thought, okay, this is the beginning of the end. In a few weeks' time, I'll be playing something else. But then when the DLC and the new raid dropped, Coda's End, just the first bit, it reminded me of why I loved it in the first place. It was just complete mayhem. It was the unknown, six of us just going around basically trying to find our way in the dark. And that, I don't know, it's my first foray into like MMO in any real sense. I never played Warcraft, I never played anything like that, although we did actually try and play a Lord of the Rings version briefly, but it just didn't work out. And the fact that it's on console suits me. I don't play many games on PC, but I love console games, and I just think it's very well made.
I think its framework is something other developers should look to for when they want to do a console MMO.
Absolutely.
Like Elder Scrolls Online's been pushed back to June of 2015, isn't it? Yeah. And and like that, I just don't feel like that framework can work on consoles anymore. Destiny seems to have nailed it. I mean, the thing is, like, you see, where people who would never play World of Warcraft, it's not our kind of game, but you're talking about, I have a raiding party, I have a team who I raid with, like people you met online just for that.
But this is the thing, the wonderful thing about Destiny is actually the community that's sprung out around it. I mean, how do you get a raiding party? Well, somebody set up a website that makes it very easy to go on, say what your character is, what you're looking to do, and within minutes you'll have been part of a 3-man team or a 6-man team. And there's the Reddit forum, which is fantastic. There's guys now, it's just the whole community that came around it. It's a very social game. And that's really the first game on console that I can remember that's actually had that element to it, where you've got people online who are Sherpas, so they help newbies go through the raid for the first time. And if there's also people who dedicate themselves to helping sort of deaf and mute people who can't use the mics. So all that sort of specific thing. It's the first time I've ever been part of something like that. People are making their own apps. So you can go on very quickly and find new raiding partners, or if you need advice or whatever, the chances are the first place you go is Reddit to find out a little bit of information, but it's not like it ruins the story in a way. It's just that extra involvement. You may be away from your console, but if you're on the bus or whatever, you can go on and figure out what's the daily that day. Is there an easier way to get through it or whatever? And it's everything that's sprung up around Destiny. I think it's fantastic. I understand the cynicism, and people talk about it like it's an endless grind and stuff, but if you want to be miserable about that sort of stuff, you can say it for any game. You can call Last of Us like it's just another first person shooter, but that's, I don't know, if you can suspend the disbelief to enjoy the grind in a way, it's anything that rewards you on a consistent basis can be called a grind. And I will get to the point where I get sick of it and go on and play something else, but I'm not done with it yet.
But it seems like Destiny might fall into a cycle where you said you were getting sick of it just before Coda's End came out, that maybe people will go away, they'll come back for an expansion, play for a month, go away, and that will repeat throughout its life cycle. And then if there's a Destiny 2, it'll be the same formula almost.
Yeah, I mean, the light at the end of the tunnel is when they're bringing out the DLCs, they're only raising the level cap by 2 levels, so it's not like something you have to be playing on a weekly basis forever to stay in the loop. I mean, if I get to level 31 or 32 now, I can go away safely for a couple of months knowing that when I come back I'll not be like miles behind. I'll not have to farm or grind to get up to that sort of speed. So it feels like now it's at a pace where I can maybe start playing it a little bit less but still be involved with it. And it's just been brilliant. I've enjoyed it and I'm continuing to enjoy it, but at some point I'll have to wean myself off of it.
Yeah. What would your third be then, Michael?
I'm going to echo Gareth's sentiment and say Destiny as well. I'll just be quick and snappy because I don't want to repeat, because I agree with more or less everything he said. But Destiny, in my eyes, is a flawed masterpiece. It was probably the most hyped game of 2014. I mean, you heard in the build up to release all this like reports of having a marketing budget and development budget combined of 500 million, and that Bungie had this, and Activision had this 10-year plan for it. And you can really see that because the way they're implementing the content. At the minute there's only 2 expansions, the recent Dark Below and House of Wolves next year, but it really is like, it's so mechanically sound. The gameplay and the shooting are just on a level of their own, and you would expect that of Bungie after nailing that formula for Halo and making arguably one of the best console shooters of all time. And you can really see that pedigree in Destiny, but it's just lumbered down and like almost undermined by this like horrible story,
hampered by expectation as well.
Well, of course I mean that level of expectation this year was attached to Watch Dogs as well, and like Watch Dogs was just a beast in itself because it was delayed and stuff. But getting back to Destiny, that when you have an actor that is so in vogue as Peter Dinklage, as you know, you would think that his voice work, but it's just so phoned in. And even when they had the alpha test, they actually had to like rework it and make it more mechanical, because he obviously plays as like a robot assistant ghost. But that kind of, it just felt really lazy and just not well implemented. And to have that against these massive, like absolutely colossal production values, the level of detail in the worlds and the scope of it is absolutely unbelievable. But for me, it was pulled back from being something great, and I guess that's why I'm so excited for Destiny 2, because I'm hoping that they can kind of over the next 2 to 3 years they can really like hone in on those problems. I mean, Bungie have been quite active, taking in community feedback, and you can see that with the weekly strikes and even the daily strikes. So they know how to release the content and keep players interested. Like as you were saying about the level cap, not releasing it or raising it too much, so they know whether it's 2, 3, 6 months down the line, you can still jump back into it. And it has that drop in, drop out feel of it, where you can, if you want to play a game for a night that you haven't played in a while, it could just be Destiny, and you could just play it for 2 to 3 hours and have a blast. So it arguably is one of the most enjoyable games of the year, but at the same time, most underwhelming. It's strange. I would put it on my best of list and worst list as well.
It could have very easily been all 3 of our number ones, but
exactly.
The story lets it down. But sort of the caveat against that is actually where the story fails, the community they've built up around it have actually just filled those gaps. And so within our raiding party or whatever, we have our own sort of narrative where this guy just cannot get the bit that he wants to drop in the raid, and it's hilarious. So I think people fill in the gaps, but perhaps they shouldn't have to. You go on Reddit and people make up these like comedy stories about certain, not glitches as such, but little bits baddies in the game. Who Randall the Vandal is quite famous and stuff, but it's okay for the community to rally around and fill those gaps, and that's a fantastic thing to see. But maybe they shouldn't have had to. The story, and you can tell that the story was there but was removed for some reason. I
think it's strange with like an MMO type game. Story is a problem, because how can you have a good narrative when everyone's the hero?
Yeah,
it's like there's a say there's 10 million people playing Destiny, you're all the hero in your own narrative. And almost the way they've scaled it back with the Gromar cards and stuff could be seen as a good thing, because it gives you breathing space to understand the universe and then have your own place in it. But in the same way, they promised a big story, and like reading stuff on an app isn't a big story.
That's right.
It's supplementary, but it should be in the game as well.
A lot of other games, if they had the problems with story that Destiny has, those games would be written off as crap games. But Destiny doesn't, because there's so much else there. The gameplay and the social side of things, there's enough there to still keep it. Certainly in Michael and my top 5.
It's my 3 as well, to be honest.
This is a comprehensive number 3.
But that's it. I mean, for a story for a game with its flaws, there's still so much there that it can still stand.
But I think that says it all, that it's third in all our top 5s, because it's not number 1, it's not last. It's good and bad. There's potential. It's not everything it could have been, but it's not a complete disaster.
I think that's because it almost it almost spans across so many different genres. You talk about the console MMO and how difficult it was to nail that transition where you have the Elder Scrolls Online and the way you were saying earlier, Jason, but it is built as a shared world shooter, so technically speaking it's not an MMO, but it still has that kind of feel to it, and it has that benefit of appealing to such a wide audience that it has. I mean, it's sold super well, so the development of a sequel is all but inevitable. It's got a good foundation there,
The core gameplay loop is incredible as well. The combat is just insanely fun, and the missions are fun. The gear, like the loot system, I really like. I know there's been problems with it, but from when I started playing it, I thought it was a good way to work it. You don't get massive amounts of loot. You're not like going to a shop and selling 40 level 4 guns. Like, it's rare when you get a drop, and it's usually good. And there's flaws with it, but the core, do a mission, level up, get better gear, repeat is good, and the missions are fun, the combat's great, and I just feel that part of it's nailed. It's just the expectation is the disappointment.
Destiny 2 can only be much better, and that's a great thing.
It's exciting. Terrible that we're looking forward to, like, when one game comes out, you're like, I can't wait to see how good the sequel's going to be, but it's just the way things are. We'll move up to 2 quickly then. What would your 2 be, Gareth?
80 Days on iOS, and it could have very easily been number 1. I loved, again, this goes back to the Monument Valley stuff I was saying. I love the premium games on iOS. I love to see them coming back and being back in vogue, and I think it was fantastic, and I actually think that a good premium game on iOS is the best value you can get from games. I love the story world they created. I like the gameplay. I mean, it was really just, it was like one of those old-fashioned books where you go along, you make your decisions, and then, you know, turn to page 63 if you say yes, page 64 you say no. It was that sort of thing. But the story world and the protagonist, Passepartout, it's a well-known story, you know, Phileas Fogg. It's something you've probably heard about in childhood and things, but it was something different from games. I played it when I was travelling, going on holiday on the plane, and it was just, the plane journey just disappeared because I was engrossed in it. I was reading the story. I had complete control of where I was going around the world, what route I was taking. There was a lovely little buying and trading system as you go around the world, and there was just enough there. It wasn't overwhelming. There was no part of the gameplay that you would forget about at any time, like you can in some games if there's so much to do. It just felt so well made, and the story was just so well written, and the replay value, because there were so many ways to go through it, and each way just felt unique to you, and it was just a really, really well made game, and I absolutely loved it. It's the best value game I've bought in, you know, easily 4 or 5 years.
It seems like the kind of game as well, with the replay value, you could play it endlessly because you think to yourself, I could do that better next time. I could do it in less days, or I could finish with more money, or
Exactly.
There's still more to see in it.
And it was actually, I think it was yesterday where they brought out an update where there's, you know, you can now go over the North and South Poles, and that wasn't there before, so it's the perfect excuse for me to dip into it, and I'll do that next week. And it's, you know, it's maybe an hour and a half, gets you around the world, so it's not a massive commitment. And it's, yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I couldn't recommend a game more to anyone who's looking for a good mobile game.
Yeah. Number 2.
Number 2. These two games, similar to Gareth, it's hard to define 1 and 2 for me on my list, but I would most likely settle for Dragon Age Inquisition as my number 2 for 2014. Truth be told, I haven't sunk a lot of time into it as of yet. I've only played it for about 15 hours, but from that, I mean, that is a long time, but it's considered a sprawling RPG like Dragon Age. 15 hours is the tip of the iceberg. Interestingly, it's the first Dragon Age game that I've actually played, and it reminds me of my experience with Skyrim, whereas Skyrim was the first Elder Scrolls game that I played, but it was enough. It was a great taste of that franchise where I went back and played Oblivion at the same time as Inquisition. It has given me that, like, you know, taste of what the gameplay and the pedigree of, you know, BioWare as a studio are like renowned for having, you know, great stories and a great cast of characters that you can make picks and choose with. And Inquisition just has like a really phenomenal setting, and it has that world where you can just sink your time in. And as an RPG, that's the kind of stuff you look for. With a leveling system that doesn't feel like you're grinding away endlessly for nothing, and the ability to kind of choose your own path in a sense as well, like different moral choices, whether you pick the Templars or you side with the mages, just different things like that is a great way to kind of engage in the story, because at the same time the story isn't like the main takeaway for Dragon Age Inquisition, for me anyway. It's just almost that sense of creating your own character, going into an RPG world and really just, you know, spending a lot of time, and it is the only game that I want to play at the minute, because it's just one of those games where it has its hooks in you. You can't stop thinking about it and thinking about, you know, the best kind of armor and weapon customization and nailing your character and creating like a badass Inquisition as a team to close the big breach in the sky. So no, I'm really looking forward to playing more of it, and it is definitely one of the best games I've played in a while, not just this year.
Yeah, it's my second Destiny this year. I would say my second game is Transistor, the second game by Supergiant Games, who made Bastion. And Transistor was just an amazing game. In terms of the soundtrack, the art design, and the story was just beautifully done. And in the same way in Bastion, the way they had the narrator, like voiceover sort of told all the actions, characters didn't really speak. That's the same thing in Transistor, where the Transistor, the sort of weird sword type weapon, almost narrates all the events in weird sort of like third person style. And you learn about the protagonist through how she interacts with the world and through the Transistor, rather than her sort of like talking herself. And as well as all that being brilliant, the combat system was insanely fun and had a ridiculous amount of depth. The way you could battle in real time or slow things down and kind of make moves, and each of your moves would cost a certain amount of your active bar. but you had like 4 or 5 slots for items. You got like 40 different powers that had different effects depending on what slot they were in. So you could have them like active or passive, and then there was like the support slots, and there was 40 things across like 6 different spaces. You just had millions of possible combat combinations, and the new Game Plus mode was almost about going back in and fighting the harder enemies and really getting the nuances of the combat. So it was just spot on with story, design, everything, and I absolutely loved it. And the 8 hours it took to beat flew by, and I wanted to go back into it right away. And usually when you beat a game you want distance from it, but right away I was like, right, new Game Plus, let's go again, let's see more of this. Have you played it, Michael?
Yeah, I haven't played it the whole way through yet, but no, I completely agree. Transistor is one of those games where it kind of just cropped up in the PlayStation Store one day, and you're like, unknown quantity, new IP, but having that supermassive Supergiant games, the pedigree behind them are obviously phenomenal, because Bastion is widely considered to be one of the best games of recent years. So Transistor was almost, when I stepped into it, I didn't know what to expect. But as you say, like the level of customization would just take me completely by surprise. So it is one of those games where I want to go back to very soon and play the whole way through, because the character of Red, as even though the majority of the dialogue will come through the sword, or the overriding narrator, it's still like a fascinating story, and just a nice way for the developer to communicate that, because instead of reading through passages of dialogue and stuff, and picking up random tidbits of information through the environment, I just really enjoyed it, and I would like to go back and finish it, definitely.
So we're down to number 1 then.
Number 1. Cue the drum roll.
What's your number 1 year of the game? Game of the year.
You're brilliant.
My number 1 is Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes. For anyone who loves Metal Gear Solid, it was just not long overdue as such, but any new installment is just it's manna from heaven, really, or manna from Hideo. It was the first game I got on PlayStation 4, and I think this is important as well, that graphics wise it looked incredible. I mean, it really did. The games that came out with PS4, I remember it was like Battlefield 4 and Ghosts, which I already had on PS3. So it was the first game I got that felt in any way next gen, and that's important. But I'm an absolute Metal Gear Solid, not my favourite game. If I was to name my top 5 favourite games of all time, at least 2 of them would be Metal Gear Solid games. It was £20, and people say it was only like 2 hours to do the main mission. Yeah, it was, but there was so much more to it than that. There were so many Easter eggs, which is what Hideo Kojima always does incredibly well. And for anyone who had played, from Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3 and 4, there was a lot there, and it actually forced me. I'd read enough beforehand to know that I should play Peace Walker, which was on PSP, and I got in the master version on PS3, and I went back and played that specifically to be prepared for it. So any game that does that, I think, deserves a lot of credit in terms of the importance and story, which is always sort of above all for any game for me. But the gameplay was brilliant. The Easter eggs were fantastic, and it was a nice. I thought, £20, I probably put about 15 hours into it. So in terms of value, I actually thought it was spot on. There was a lot to do, and it was a small setting, but everything was so well made, and there was so much in that setting to do. It was kind of like a Guantanamo Bay based type of camp, and there was enough in there. I mean, it works very well as a teaser for Phantom Pain. So that's the next game I'm absolutely thrilled to be looking forward to. That and No Man's Sky next year will be the 2 big games, I hope, of 2015. And there was just so much there, and I loved it. And I think it's one of those things, if you're a Metal Gear Solid nut, it has to be in your top 2 or 3 games of this year. The only criticism, and it's the Kiefer Sutherland voice for Snake.
That was one of the big questions for it.
There has to be, and it's actually got to the point where I just can't believe they got rid of David Hayter, because he's synonymous with the franchise, and he's iconic in himself. So I'm wondering if in Phantom Pain will maybe be introduced to Solid Snake in some way after that, and maybe David Hayter's still doing Solid Snake's voice and Kiefer does Snake's, and maybe it's just to differentiate between the two.
It's actually an interesting way to look at it, that maybe, because I don't see why they'd stop using David Hayter, so maybe the plan is that the 2 Snakes will meet, or there'll be a crossover in some way, and they need to have 2 different voices, basically.
Yeah, that may be the case, and he tweeted himself that he had no idea that Ground Zeroes was coming out. That's kind of what disappointed me, because it does seem that he's just been cut out of the loop, and he's so integral to the whole character of Snake and Solid Snake. it's odd to see why that would happen, but there's just so much in it beyond the main mission. I mean, collecting little XOF patches, and it was built in such a way to leave you with so many questions, and I love that. I love the fact that you can go on and you can read the rumours online and people come up with concoct their own stories, all knowing that, you know, this time next year we'll know because Phantom Pain will be out. But I don't know, I absolutely love Metal Gear Solid, and I love Hideo Kojima's sort of story world, and the fact that he features in 2 of my top 5 with PT as well, I think that says a lot about him.
It seems like Kojima was well on form for 2014 for basically making those demos that are great value for money, that get you excited for the actual thing.
Absolutely.
Like just like teasers that are fully fleshed in their own right.
It's like the best kind of vertical slice.
Yeah. It's just because it's not even that you're being shown a trailer or you're playing a demo that you know is just one section. It's like ostentatiously you're playing a whole game where you're like, the actual thing could be better than this.
Yeah.
Even with PT, it's like if the game is half as scary as PT is, then it'll be a must buy.
Exactly.
Anyway, number 1, Michael.
Rounding off, I would say Alien Isolation, Creative Assembly's big massive take on the seminal and maybe a bit alien franchise. Because in the last, across any medium, whether it's like video games or films, the Alien legacy and as an IP has almost been, you know, battered, because
absolutely butchered.
Yeah,
is the way I would put it.
I mean, the most notorious one was 2013's Colonial Marines. Gearbox just completely made a balls up of that, to be frank, because the preview footage, like as a game, they were taking many influences from James Cameron's Aliens, more action oriented, you know, putting you in the shoes of these Marines taking down, you know, hordes of xenomorphs. But the Creative Assembly, they completely scaled that all back and really honed in on the first film, the 1979 Ridley Scott. As a film that is completely iconic, you know, completely as a genre entry into the sci-fi horror, it is just on another level, you know, in terms of atmosphere. So when it was announced that they were going to create a video game adaptation of that, it made me a bit apprehensive because it's one of my favourite films. But they got access to a lot of, you know, archival material from 20th Century Fox, and they really put it to good use. I mean, they created the Sevastopol station, the nth degree. Everything is just so well like rendered in game that you would actually feel as though you're walking through a segment of the film that just didn't make the final cut. It did have its problems, but it just, the atmosphere and the setting and the gameplay itself as a survival horror experience was just unbelievable, because the xenomorph was just designed so well. It was procedurally generated in the sense that its movements were completely random. You would think of games, for example, like Metal Gear Solid, where if you memorize the enemy movement, you know where to go, you know where they're going, so you can like plan your route around them. But knowing that the alien is completely, you know, sporadic in its movements, and at any time you die, you can't say, right, it went that way, so I'll go this way. You have to adapt, and having that constant sense of fear in a horror game is just, you know, absolutely terrifying. It did feel a bit long. It felt as though it just needed cut down maybe 2 or 3 hours, because the campaign itself, you know, if you took your time, you're talking 15 to 17 hours, which is a big ask for a campaign for a first-person game. I know, like, you traditionally speaking, story, you know, Call of Duty campaign as a comparison, but relative to that, it's much more meatier, and, you know, and it deserves that because the source material is so well respected. But it's absolutely one of the best games I played, not just in terms of survival horror, but as a licensed adaptation from one of the greatest horror films and sci-fi films of all time. It really done that justice, and it's definitely the one that resonated with me the most this year.
Beautiful.
Totally.
I would say my top is actually Dragon Age Inquisition, which was your second. Just purely because it's what I've been playing the most lately, and I've heard people say the starting area, the hinterlands, like that you should get out of there as soon as possible because there's so much more to see. But I've spent probably 8 hours in hinterlands just walking about doing random quests, doing silly stuff.
Unbalance the game. Yeah. You're way too strong.
I actually did a story mission last night and I was way too powerful for it. But it's like the fact just walking about in the world, discovering like so many tiny little quests and just little bits of lore and so much collectibles and fun stuff to do and see, it's just incredible. Like if all of the game world is half as good as that first area is, then it's an astounding game. It's absolutely huge. I've barely scratched the surface of it, even like 15 hours in, and I just can't stop playing it. I can't stop thinking about it, and I just keep wanting to go back to it. And I really love the way that you're, as the leader of the Inquisition, you can send your party out to do missions on your behalf, and you gather influence and power, and you're like recruiting allies. You're basically building your own army, and there's a really good sense of power in the world that you are the Inquisition, and you have this power to close the rifts, and you have that agency to shape the world the way you want. And it might not play out that way at the end. Like, everyone knows BioWare has had issues with that before, especially the Mass Effect 3 ending. But so far the characters and the story are really interesting, and it's just an amazing world to be in regardless of the quality of the story. And I just can't wait to play more of it. I can't stop thinking about it. I wish I was playing it right now. Hey.
I think it's definitely on my list of the next game I will play will be that, and it'll hopefully be enough to win me off Destiny. But
it'd be the perfect Christmas game.
Well, that's it. I mean, Michael mentioned the same bracket as Skyrim and Oblivion earlier. I played Oblivion; it's one of my favourite games of all time. And Skyrim, I absolutely adored, and I sunk so many hours into it, even in the first couple of weeks. So the fact that it's mentioned in that bracket is enough to get me onto it. Totally. But again, it's one of those games I've only heard good things.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be the game I hammer over Christmas.
Perfect. I wonder if we can get down to 3 top games of 2014.
Oh, I don't know.
I think Destiny has to be.
Destiny's a given for one.
Considering it's on all our
We all
lists,
said Destiny.
you know.
So
it's all at number 3, and I guess that's probably the natural place to put it. Yeah. Number 3 of the year. There was enough there for everyone to enjoy it, no matter whether you play it for 10 hours or 100. Yeah.
I think it's very fashionable to bash Destiny.
Yeah.
And pick holes in it and pick at its complaints, but as a game and as gameplay, it's just incredible. It's a great experience.
I don't know anyone who played Destiny for 1 hour and then turned it off because it was crap. Put it that way. You know, it's everyone who plays it has enjoyed what they've played.
Yeah,
and that's a good game. You know, 2 and 1. I have no idea where we're going with this.
What the only game, like all of us mentioned as well, was me and you mentioned Dragon Age.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I can see exactly why that would be maybe number 2 or number 1. There's enough to get me involved, and I can't really speak about it because I'm ignorant, but I've only heard fantastic things about it.
If that was the case, then I would probably, maybe push for Dragon Age, maybe to be number 1, and then I would have to say I would agree with Gareth in the sense that like maybe you put PT on there purely because it's so unique. I know it's almost hypocritical to try and put a game on a Game of the Year list where it's not strictly speaking a game, but as an experience, like it's.
But PT could have just been released as a game called PT and nothing else, and people would have played it and loved it and been like, "What's this about?" Even if it didn't have the Silent Hills teaser at the end, it would have been a great game.
That's exactly
it. I'd say PT at 2, Dragon Age at first.
Yeah.
So that's Destiny.
That, yeah.
Destiny in 3rd, PT 2nd, Dragon Age 1st place for our games.
I mean, that might not be the most conclusive because like there is obviously some phenomenal games in all of our lists. But in terms of
consensus, I think otherwise we'll be here all day trying to argue over.
That's true.
Yeah. Gareth would just be like, and Ground Zeroes is at 0.
It's one of those, Ground Zeroes is one of those things. It's like, okay, you don't rate it as number 1, then you just don't understand. It's
everyone's entitled to their opinion, but yours is wrong.
But that's it. And to be honest, I don't argue with Dragon Age as number 1. It actually just makes me want to go home and play it even more. And PT, I mean, you just have to sort of take your hat off to the fact that that's something completely different, and you have to recognise what that achieves by being, a free demo. Fair enough. It's a sin to call it a demo because it's more than that. It's a nicely packaged, terrifying, pant-wettingly shit scary experience, and it just shows what can be done. It shows the power of sound and of anticipation, and it's not just about frantically going around trying to kill monsters. I mean, you basically just walk up and down a corridor. It's all about
pacing, really, because considering you explore the same area.
It just shows how games can be so much more in terms of an experience, and it's the sort of thing. It was the sort of experience you only really get in going to see a fantastic film, and I think to see anything on a console that achieves that is always fantastic.
I think as well, in a year of like botched launches and sequels and general disappointment, and there's been a lot of issues with games in 2014, but PT was just a surprise out of nowhere that hit the nail on the head perfectly.
Exactly. It just flew under the radar.
Yeah, for that it deserves recognition, if nothing else, even if it wasn't such a great experience. And it was. Wait, so we'll tie it up then, I guess. That was our year in review for 2014, and the top 3 games were, I forgot them. Destiny at 3rd place, PT at 2nd, and Dragon Age Inquisition at 1st place.
I can't believe our top 3 didn't have any mobile games. Shameless. But in the same, so well, that's just the way it was. You 2 need to play 80 days.
80 days.
And I guarantee 80 days would have come out.
I think if I'd played 80 days, it would be up there. So that was the first episode of the Iglucast, our 2014 year in review. If you like what you listen to, you can follow us on Twitter at Iglu Media, all smalls. And until next time, have a great Christmas and a happy new year, and play loads of games.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.